You are now live.
All right. Good morning, everybody. What time is it? 9 o'clock. I'm going to call this meeting of the Planning Commission to order. Do we have a quorum present?
Yes, it appears we do have a quorum.
Okay. First item is the consent agenda. The commission may request for a consent agenda item to be moved to the regular agenda for presentation and public comment. Otherwise, the consent agenda will be considered in one vote. We've got the minutes from last month and a final plat of the Williams edition on the consent agenda. Would anyone like to make a motion?
Make a motion to approve.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda. All in favor, say aye by show of hands. And opposed?
Like approved, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 0.
All right. Regular agenda, subdivision plats. Planning Commission has final authority for approval. Appeals may be directed to the City Council. A, preliminary plat of City Business Park North. Request for approval of a preliminary plat of City Business Park North, being approximately 320 acres north of Pauline Boulevard and north of US Highway 67.
Thank you. Good morning, Planning Commissioners. This is Jeff Fisher, Principal Planner. Can everybody see my screen okay?
Yes, sir.
Okay, great. I'm upstairs today. So this is a preliminary plat, excuse me, go back, of 4 lots and a replat of lot 2. So the existing fire training facility was actually just this square in here and the flag before, and the city wants to expand that fire training facility, so it's now going to take up the blue area. Well, when that happens, that cuts into another tract, and so creates remainders. And so they're preliminary platting the remainders, and then they're doing a final or a replat of just the blue area in here. So this is the animal shelter. This is a remainder that's going to become a new lot, and then this large piece here will be another remainder. So you're going to have lot 2A for the fire training, and then 1, 2, 3 more lots for a total of 4. The entire acreage is 311.61 in the ML zoning, so that's a large area, and 8.67 acres in the part of it that's in the ETJ. The future land use is campus institutional and also some industrial as well. So this is looking at the preliminary plat that was prepared, and you can see all 4 lots. Lot 2 is the one that's going through a final replatting process. This is an aerial of the existing fire training facility. So staff believes that the preliminary plat, the final plat will conform with the new preliminary plat. All of the lots will reflect, and then as they go to final plat, those remainders, if there's ever any future development. There is a couple future collector roads that go east, if you've noticed that. And so those were documented on the preliminary plat. So when they go to final plat, those pieces, they'll have to provide their dedications and construct those streets. But again, that's down the road. It's not going to affect the fire training facility today. The new fire training facility is located within the campus institutional future land use that supports public facilities. So it conforms with a comprehensive plan, and it will also guide future growth, water, and city sewer, and all required easements for water mains and sewer mains were provided. So it conforms with the intent of purpose statements as well. Staff recommendation is to approve the preliminary plat of City Business Park North, subject to 1 condition of approval, and approval of a replat of lot 2, City Business Park North, subject to 3 conditions of approval. I'll just go over these briefly. For the preliminary plat, rename the preliminary plat of City Business Park North. It says a preliminary replat of City Business Park. It should just say plat because it's not a replat of anything. And then the conditions of the fire training facility replat. Provide a copy of the tax certificate, renamed to first replat of City Business Park North. It's just cleaner because if they go to replat it again, that one will be the second replat. And obtain signatures of the approved preliminary plat prior to recordation of this replat. Also, as a note, there will be a drainage study that's required, but that can be done prior to building permit issuance. Engineering Services has granted a deferral to the building permit stage. So that concludes my presentation, and I'll stop sharing my screen if you all have any questions.
I have a couple. Item B on the agenda is a replat of Lot 2. Do you want me to read that into the record for this, or do you want to do it separately?
Oh, you can read it into the record, and we could do one motion if that works for you.
Okay, so item B is a replat of Lot 2, City Business Park North. Request for approval of a replat of Lot 2, City Business Park North, being 34.856 acres north of Pauline Boulevard and north US Highway 67. The second thing is the deferral of the drainage study. What are the requirements for platting as it stands, and why do we continue to issue deferrals of the drainage studies?
I'm going to let Mitchell Gatlin with engineering address that, Chair Stribley.
Sure. Good morning, Mitchell Gatlin with Engineering Services. A lot of what we look at with deferrals of the drainage studies are very common on commercial lots, mainly because a lot of times when they're replatting these commercial lots, they don't know what they're doing quite yet. And so what we don't want to do is we don't want to require a drainage study at the front end, have them do a grading plan, construct a detention pond, and then, you know, when they come in, submit their site plan, they have to modify something that could actually end up making them heavily modify their grading plan or their detention structure or anything like that. So it's common practice on commercial properties for us to grant this deferral, because we know as they develop, we will get that.
So if it's deferred to the permitting process, in the instance of this lot, we have, what do we have? 230 acres of land, 320 acres of land that are in this preliminary plat. And it looks like we're only looking at 35 acres for consideration for the development. So we'd only pull permits for 35 acres. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Would we require the preliminary plat for all 320 acres or only the 35?
It would be the final drainage study for the 35. So it would be a little bit more of a detailed study on the 35 acres.
Okay. I guess the concern I have in deferring these is that we don't have an understanding of how the water is draining through the site. And if we get into peeling off small sections of land and issuing final plats off of a preliminary plat that doesn't have a drainage study, then we don't know what the overall plan is for dealing with the water down the road. Do you guys share that same concern? How do we mitigate that risk?
So I will say, and Chief Dunn might be able to chip in on this as well, there is an existing detention pond already out at the fire training center that most of this area drains towards. So really down the road, it would be just evaluating that detention pond as the site developed. And Chief Dunn, you can chip in if I said anything incorrectly.
No, and I'm not speaking specifically to this case. I guess this is a broader concern that if we defer the drainage study for a large tract and it's deferred to the permitting process for smaller sections of the larger tract, then we don't really have a complete understanding of what the study is for the entire tract. Does that make sense?
This is Aaron Benoit, Assistant Director of Planning Development Services. Mitchell, what are the triggers for a drainage study when it comes to the development? Isn't it a certain size and certain percentage of impervious cover?
Yes. So the triggers are the site has to be an acre or more, and it has to change the impervious cover by more than 5% of the land area.
And so in this case, Chair Stribling, being kind of a commercial property, we don't know what that future development is going to be by the fire division or the fire department. And so we're unsure if their improvements in the future would trigger a drainage study per our ordinance. And so therefore,
Okay.
we choose to defer a lot of those until we see what the actual development may be.
So, but again, we're doing a preliminary plat for 320 acres, and it looks like the fire center is only 35. So it's just over 10% of the total land area to begin with. So it's not likely that the improvements are going to trigger. I'm assuming, is it 5% of the impervious cover for the preliminary plat of 320 acres, or is it 5% of 35 acres?
It would be the 5% of the final platted land area.
Of the 35?
That is correct.
Okay. Again, it's not specific to this case. I'm just trying to get an understanding of how we're handling drainage. On
Sorry,
plats like
Travis.
this.
I have a quick question along the same lines. So let's say they triggered a drainage study for the 34, 35 acres. Does that also, do y'all take into consideration the 200 acres that are still out there on how it affects that as well? You know what I'm saying?
Sure. No, so it would just be based on the 35 acres, but from what I understand, and I'm going to kind of lean on Jeff here on the platting process, if the other remaining acreage were to develop, then those would also require to be platted. And so as those are developed and final platted out of that preliminary, those would require a drainage study as well.
That's right. That's what I was going to ask you, Mitchell. Yeah. So the current one, you're looking at drainage in the 35 acres, which will be accounted for through this process. And then if they go to replat the remainders, those would also need drainage studies and account for those. So they're
Okay,
not.
so is the drainage study required on the preliminary plat or on the final plat?
It would be on the final plat in this case.
Is it normally required on the preliminary plat or the final plat?
It can depend. If it's just a preliminary, then we'll normally ask for a preliminary drainage study. But if there's a final plat that's accompanying this land area, then we'll usually just let it come in as a final drainage study.
Okay.
I have a question. So right now, the total, the 320 acres or 311, whatever it was, the total acreage, it's all in native habitat, correct? So if you're not disturbing it, it has a natural drain to it right now. What I think the reason that you wait until the final plat is so that whenever they start getting it ready to, to make sure that it drains properly and you're not messing with the other natural habitat that's set up already that has its own way of draining and taking care of itself. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Thank you.
This is Russell with SKG. I realize this is not my case, but I'm listening to the conversation and want to pitch in a little bit about this. If there's future roads kind of planned, you may want to evaluate those roads if you have drainage going to those. But the typical, I guess, thought process is that a detention pond will limit drainage to existing conditions. And so downstream of the site that's being developed, like Mitchell indicated with the final plat, is that for that 35 acres, you're developing a detention pond that limits discharge to existing conditions. So there's not really downstream impacts other than what already exists today. And so you don't necessarily have to always evaluate downstream. Now, if there's a road that your drainage is contributing to, you may want to look at that, or if you want to look at a regional detention pond. It's hard to do it just on one specific case to talk about it because every site is unique. And so, as Mitchell talked about, engineering usually evaluates those and and it does help to defer them. Otherwise, we're doing drainage studies twice, and you're costing the developer maybe additional money or cost impact in those in doing twice.
That makes a lot of sense. I guess I was just curious about how the city's approaching these drainage study requirements. Obviously, it's a consideration that needs to be evaluated for development. And I know that there have been a lot of requests to defer studies in plats that we've reviewed as a planning commission in the past. I guess I just didn't understand how the process worked from an ordinance standpoint. What does the ordinance currently require, and why do we continue to deviate from that ordinance? Why don't we talk about changing it so that it's more consistent with the long range planning that's being done on these larger tracts?
Mr. Stribling,
Yes.
this is Chief Dunn. So
Yes, sir. Good morning.
Mitchell, can you, or whoever's controlling the map, can you bring up the first map with the 320 acres and then my 12 acres and the 22 I'm trying to add?
Yeah, let me share that again. Bear with me 1 second. My apology on that. My screen.
Bring up
froze.
number 7. Bring up number 7.
Okay.
So go back one.
Go back one. Okay.
So the green square inside the blue square is what my training center consists of right now. It's just
Yes,
under
sir.
12 acres. I have a retention pond, all the drainage stuff already done. The blue area is the area I'm trying to add to keep people from encroaching on that and for future development. Nothing is going to be developed now. I'm just trying to secure the land so that as we do expand in the future, I don't have training centers miles apart, or because all my infrastructure is set up on that 12 acres.
Yes,
So
sir.
in the future, we'll add props and different things there. And that's, I mean, and I don't know where they're going to go now. So I don't know how you would do a drainage study if you don't know where you're going to place these things. The
Right.
bottom of the blue line where that little black arrow is, there is a drainage easement running along that road, but all that would be, you know, the engineers, whenever I decide, and I may not be here for that turn, because it's liable to be years before anything's developed. I mean, you're talking, I mean, we would like to put a aircraft burner out there, but the ground infrastructure is over $1 million for that. So as we move forward in the future and gain funds or get grants or whatever, that's when we would look to see where we're going to place that stuff.
Okay. Thank you so much, Chief Dunn.
So basically for the near foreseeable future, it will remain raw land as it is.
I understand completely. Okay. And this may be something that we could visit down the road. I'm not trying to pick on specifically this case. I was just trying to get a broader understanding of how we're handling drainage. Because like I said, it's something that we continue to get requests for deferral of, and I don't understand how the process works as it is today. So,
Mr. Chairman,
yes, sir.
I was just going to add from the ordinance standpoint, both at the preliminary drainage study and the final drainage study, those are required at both the preliminary plat and final plat stages. But in both of those ordinance sections, there's an exemption where the city engineer may waive it altogether or limit those requirements. So that is provided for in the ordinance as well.
Okay, so typically, when someone's doing a preliminary plat, they're asked to provide a drainage study for that that plat area. And then if there's a piece of that preliminary plat that's moving into final plat, there's another final drainage study for just that acreage or for the entire site.
It would be for just that acreage.
Okay. Okay.
Find it right now.
All right. I don't have any other questions. Does anyone else have questions for the staff? All right. I'm going to open it up for public comment. Anyone wishing to speak on this case, please state your name and your address or single member district. All right. I'm going to close public comment. And any of my colleagues that wish to ask questions, share comments, or make a motion, please do so.
Make a motion to approve as presented.
Second.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second to approve the preliminary plat and is this a final plat or a preliminary plat for the 34 acres? That's a final, isn't it?
It's a replat.
Okay, and the replat for the 35 acres. All in favor, say aye by show of hands. And opposed?
Approved 7-0.
7-0. Okay. Item C, Arden Estates. There are 3 Arden Estates. Are we going to address them comprehensively or individually?
Yes, please, if we could address them all together and read
Okay,
each one.
so I'm going to read 3 cases in here. Arden Estates, Section 1, a request for approval of the final plat for Arden Estates, Section 1, being 4.438 acres, generally located 450 feet south of the intersection of Arden Road and Northwest Drive. Arden Estates, Section 2, a request for approval of the final plat for Arden Estates, Section 2, being 2.910 acres, generally located 450 feet south of the intersection of Arden Road and Northwest Drive. And Arden Estates, Section 3, a request for approval of final plat for Arden Estates, Section 3, being 7.787 acres, generally located 450 feet south of the intersection of Arden Road and Northwest Drive.
Good morning, Planning Commissioner. Sherry Bailey, Principal Planners. You have before you Arden Estates, Sections 1, 2, and 3 were just read into the minutes. It is, if you remember, the preliminary plat was approved at your last meeting in March. And so now 3 portions of that preliminary plat are being brought forward. This is also in the process of being rezoned, and that goes to the council agenda tomorrow for that action. So we're just dealing with 3 of the residential sections. As you remember, the future land use is both commercial and neighborhood in this larger area. This is in District 6, Billy DeWitt's district, and it's the Bluffs neighborhood. And there you'll see Section 1, Section 2, and Section 3. Section 1 is a total of 4.438 acres with 16 lots. Section 2 is a total of 2.910 acres for 14 lots. And Section 3 is a total of 7.787 acres for 27 lots. And the zoning on all of these will be RS1. We did have to send out a notice because a portion of this is a replat. So we sent out 14 notices. We received 2 responses in favor and 0 in opposition. This, the rationale is in conformance with the comprehensive plan. This area is designated residential, and you did do that at your last meeting also. This is also in conformity with the purpose statements for the subdivision ordinance. In purpose statement C, it provides for orderly, safe, and efficient development. E, assists in guiding future growth. And G, provides for efficient use and extension of municipal utilities. And as you remember, this is an area that is growing fairly quickly out there. And so all of these aspects are very important. Staff is recommending approval of Arden Estates Section 1, Section 2, and Section 3, subject to 8 conditions of approval, and I'll go through those fairly quickly. The first is the tax certification. The second one is prior to plat recordation, a drainage study must be submitted and approved. 3 is prior to plat recordation, submit plans for approval of unnamed streets C and B for construction, and then construction plans or financial guarantee for those streets. Item 4 is prior to plat recordation, submit plans for approval of unnamed local streets for F, G, and D, and also construction plans or a financial guarantee for the development of those streets. Item 5 is prior to plat recordation, submit plans for approval and installation of water, main, and sewer connections, or again, the financial guarantee. 6 is prior to plat recordation, submit plans for approval and installation of the sewer main and service connections or the financial guarantee. 7 is prior to plat recordation, that the rezoning application before City Council must be approved and recorded. And item 8 is prior to plat recordation, all streets must be named and approved by 911. And we are in the process of doing that now. The names have been submitted. With that, I will stop sharing my screen and answer any questions you might have.
All right. Anyone have questions for Ms. Bailey? All right. I'm going to open it up for public comment. If you wish to speak on this case, please state your name.
Good morning, Russell with SKG Engineering. Travis, and this is a good one, kind of an example about the drainage. We're working on the kind of the preliminary drainage study right now associated with the preliminary plat, and really in specific to residential developments, because you typically don't have the opportunities to do detention ponds on individual residential lots. And street depth is so critical. The ordinance limits how deep we can flow water for a 2-year, 100-year event. So we're looking at and laying out the streets and in which way we send the drainage. It starts up at Arden Road and goes south to the Red Arroyo. We have a couple of larger commercial or multifamily tracts up by Arden Road that we're looking at. Those may have detention ponds on them, and they'll be self-contained with their drainage, but that drainage from those detention ponds will then drain to a street. So we're looking at that globally as part of the preliminary plat to make sure that in this specific case that our depth of flow in our streets meets the ordinance, and do we have to have subsurface drainage or a separate drainage ditch in somewhere, and where those detention ponds go. So in this case, we're absolutely working on all of those drainage studies. So that one really wasn't a good one to defer the drainage on. So we're working on all of that stuff for that. So really, I'm just happy to answer any questions that y'all may have on this one.
Thank you, Russell. Anyone have questions for Mr. Gully? All right. Anyone else wish to speak on this case? All right. I'm going to close public comment and open it up to the planning commissioners for comments or a motion.
Make a motion to approve as presented.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second to approve as presented. All in favor, say aye by show of hands. And opposed?
Approved 7-0.
7-0. All right. Next case is item F, first replat of lots 1 and 2, block 1, Reese Albert subdivision, and lot 1, block G, Sunnyside Edition, a request for approval of a first replat of Lot 1 and Lot 2, Block 1, Reese Albert subdivision, and Lot 1, Block G, Sunnyside Edition, being 1.938 acres located southwest of Knickerbocker Road and Deaton Street. And 2 variances from Chapter 103A2 of the Land Development and Subdivision Ordinance to maintain paving width of 36 feet with curb and gutter in lieu of the required 40 feet or 36 feet with a 4-foot sidewalk for Deaton Street, an urban local street, and to maintain a paving width of 48 feet with curb and gutter in lieu of the required 50 feet for Courier Street, an urban collector street. It is my understanding that the applicant has submitted documentation to extend, a request to extend this case and table it for 30 days. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. This is Cooper Carroll, planning intern. The applicant has requested to table this case till next month.
Okay. So we have a request to table. Would the commissioners wish to make a motion, or would you like to continue to hear this case?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to table case F to the next planning commission meeting, which would be May. It's tentatively planned for May 17th. All in favor, say aye by show of hands. And opposed?
That would be 6-0. It looks like Commissioner Spano does not have his video on at this time. He may be on a phone call.
All right. Next case, first replat of the the north 100 feet of lot 5.5, Shepherd's Edition. A request for approval of a first replat of lots 5.5 Shepherd Edition, being 0.135 acres located at 1031 Pressler Street, and a variance from Chapter 103A2 of the Land Development Subdivision Ordinance to maintain a paving width of 30 feet with curb and gutter in lieu of the required 40 or 36 feet with a 4-foot sidewalk with curb and gutter for North Irene Street, an urban local street.
I'm frozen.
Oh, no.
My screens are even frozen. Just one. Hold on, I can't do anything. Can y'all see my screen?
Not really.
Yeah, it's gone to black.
I can see your screen. It's blank.
Why don't you go ahead and close it out and open it up again?
It won't let me do anything. Hold on, guys. Sorry about this. Nope, I'm completely frozen.
And I don't have your slides.
Working on getting.
Big, like 12 ounce or whatever, please. Thank you. Thank you.
Huh? Well, I was trying to open it up, but
I'm frozen up there.
yeah.
My whole computer's frozen.
What's the case one?
Shepherd and Spencer, depending on.
Yeah, why don't you come in here and have a seat and I'll.
Okay.
Just pulling it up there. I'll let you.
Planning Commission.
Oh, no.
Your file. I can't.
Hey, Shelley, this is Jeff upstairs.
Uh-huh.
If you, I was gonna say, if you can drop it in the Y drive, Sherry or I can open it for you.
What's in legal files under the planning commission?
Okay,
Combined them.
No, we all have our separate. If
Oh,
somebody
okay.
could pull up the presentation for me,
Yeah,
where's the planning commission folder?
go back to my files. Go back to my, see right there.
Oh.
And then all the transactions are right there. We just have to find the rules.
All right.
And then hit the little. Is that
This one?
Yeah. And that should just hit open.
Okay.
That should open it right there.
Hmm. Oh. Okay, where'd your Zoom go?
Top right.
Okay. Can you see the screen?
Yes.
Perfect. This is Shelley Pascal, planner. This first subdivision we're going to look at is Shepherd's Edition. It is the first replat. It's 0.135 acres. The zoning is RS1. The future land use is neighborhood within District 3, Harry Thomas, and it is in Fort Concho East neighborhood. As you can see from this aerial, it is a vacant piece of property, and it is, at some point it was subdivided, and they're just coming through to make the subdivision legal to be able to construct a single family home on this property. There will be one single family home on the lot. They have requested a variance from the paving width from North Irene. Here's a photograph of North Irene. As you can see, it is curved and guttered currently, even though the paving width is not too standard. And just to let you know, I did send out 20 notifications and I received 1 in favor. It does conform with the comprehensive plan neighborhood, and it conforms with the purpose statement. As far as the variance, it will not be detrimental to the public safety. It is unique to this property. It is not applicable to other properties. Its physical surroundings or shape of the specific property would not result or is a hardship for the property owner, and it will not vary from the provisions of the ordinance. North Irene, it does function as is. There has not been any traffic issues, and there is already existing curb and gutter. This is our rationale to supporting this variance. It is unique. This is a small infill project, and most of the land is developed in this area, and this is a very short segment of the street. As far as the physical surroundings, this existing street will service the surrounding area adequately and already has, as I stated, curb and gutter. This street was built as a local with curb and gutter, and it continues to serve as a local street. City staff, we are recommending approval of the first replat of lot 5.5A Shepherd's Edition and approval of the variance to maintain the 30 foot of pavement with curb and gutter for North Irene, subject to 2 conditions of approval. Those conditions being the tax cert and improve North Irene or seek a variance, which they are. And is there any questions?
Anyone have questions for staff on this case? All right, I'm going to open it up for public comment. If you wish to speak, please state your name.
Russell Gully with SKG Engineering. We would ask your approval of this plat and the variance as requested and presented. Happy to answer any questions.
All right, thank you, Mr. Gully. Anyone else wish to speak on this case? All right, I'm going to close public comment. Anyone have thoughts or wish to make a motion?
Make a motion as presented with the variance.
Second.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second to approve as presented by the staff. All in favor, say aye. by show of hands? And opposed?
Approved 7-0.
All right. Next case, item H, first replat in lots 8 and 9, block R, Spencer's Edition number 2. The request for approval of a first replat of lots 8 and 9, Spencer's Edition number 2 being 0.16 acres, located at 218 South Browning Street, and the variance from Chapter 10.3A2 of the Land Development and Subdivision Ordinance to maintain a paving width of 23.5 feet without curb and gutter in lieu of the required 40 feet, or 36 feet with a 4-foot sidewalk with curb and gutter for South Browning Street, an urban local street.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is Shelley Pascal again. This is the first replat of Spencer's Edition. It's 0.160 acres. The zoning is RS1. The future land use is also neighborhood. It's in District 3, Harry Thomas. And within the same neighborhood is the Fort Concho East. As you can see from the aerial here, there's an existing home here, and they're proposing to build a carport. At some time in the past, it was split, where it's 2 long portions of property into 2 more narrow square pieces of property. So they're legalizing this subdivision and making it its own piece of property. They did request a variance from the paving on South Browning, and it's 1 residential lot. I wanted to show you a picture of this. This is South Browning, and the subject property or subject lot is right here with this home. I wanted to show this photograph because right here where these trees are is a drastic drop off. And that's the reason staff is supporting the variance to not make them widen the pavement width because of that huge drastic basic drop off right there. But it does conform with a comprehensive plan designated as neighborhood, and it also conforms with the purpose statement. Out of the 4 criteria that needs to be met to approve a variance, city staff are concentrating on both 3 and 4. The physical surroundings or shape of the property could cause a hardship for the owner, and also that the variance will not vary much from the ordinance. So I'm really looking at 3. Staff is supporting the variance because of this criteria due to the topography along South Browning, directly immediately south of the subject property on the west side of South Browning, as I pointed out in the picture. And South Browning, it was built as a local street, and it continues to serve as a local street. City staff, we are recommending approval of the first replat of lots 8 and 9, Spencer Edition number 2, and approval of the variance to maintain the paving width without curb and gutter, subject to 3 conditions of approval. And those conditions are a tax cert and just a minor detail of labeling the 25-foot building line on the plat itself and improving South Browning or seek a variance. Is there any questions? Oh, and I do want to point out that on this case, I did send out 13 notifications, and I received 1 in favor and 1 in opposition.
Okay. What was the reason for opposition?
One of the, let's see, let me go down there real quick, 1 moment. And they stated in their opposition letter, which was also in the staff report, that the person is allegedly already 4 to 5 feet into their property, which they let it go because they didn't need that land at the time, but now they want more of my land. I think it's just kind of a confusion of where the property lines are at this time. And
okay.
where they were when it was bought and purchased, and so I think it's just a confusion of where the exact property lines are, because, you know, as you know, if you just stand on the physical property itself, most people don't know where the exact line is, and I think a fence was built extending over into a neighboring property, and so now they're realizing that that's not actually their property. So this is just finalizing, making sure that, you know, the pins are set, the survey is completed, and that it's an official survey of the property.
Right. And I'm assuming that any improvements, carports, whatever they're planning to do are going to meet the setback requirements for the lot.
They will. I do believe that they're in the open structure overlay zone, but they would have to meet those requirements.
Okay. Thank you. Anyone else have questions for the staff? All right. I'm going to open it up for public comment. If you wish to speak on this case, please state your name.
Russell Gully with SKG Engineering. We would ask your approval of this replat the variances. We just have a property owner hoping to build a carport, and the replat's necessary in order for them to be able to do that. Be happy to answer any questions.
All right. Anyone else wish to speak on this case? All right, I'm going to close public comment. Anyone wish to make a motion or share their thoughts on this case?
Make a motion to approve as presented.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second to approve as presented. All in favor, say aye by show of hands. And opposed?
Approved 7-0.
All right.
I'm gonna stop that just so I can walk out.
Moving on to rezonings. City Council has final authority for approval of rezonings. Z20-03 CBD expansion, Northwest. A request for approval of a rezoning to the Central Business District zoning district from the general commercial, heavy commercial, office commercial, light manufacturing, office warehouse, and low-rise multifamily residential zoning districts on approximately 67 acres, generally located north of West Harris Avenue, east of Santa Fe Park, south of West Houston Hart Expressway, and west of North Chadbourne Street.
Thank you, Chair Stribling, Planning Commissioners. Jeff Fisher again, Principal Planner. This is the Central Business District zoning case for the Northwest area of current downtown. So we brought this forward about a year ago, and we had a number of things that held us up. Number one was COVID. Number two, some of the property owners up here, you can see we've left some of these out. They were zoned industrial. They didn't want to be part of this, so we kept those properties out of the expansion. But this is in our future land use, in our comprehensive plan is downtown. And so as the city grows, we believe that most of these properties aren't zoned industrial, and the ones that are, we didn't receive any responses opposed. So this is the time to bring this forward again. But again, we did not include the property owners that were opposed from the first time. So this is in District 3, Harry Thomas, in the downtown neighborhood, and it's approximately 67 acres. So as you can see, our future land use actually goes over to almost to Veterans Memorial Drive and Santa Fe Park over here. So most of these uses are going to be allowed in the CBD. We had a couple of private initiated applications in the last year. So we didn't need to include those. So we had the Jack's Convenience Store, we had the Salvation Army. We had one owner up here that owned some land that wanted to do a conditional use for household living. So this is now going to be, her property will be allowed by right. So again, the only issue were the industrial ones, and we left those ones out. We've already gone over the zoning. There were multiple zoning districts here, so all of those would be changed to CBD. So what we did this time is, given the large volume, we sent out 2 separate notices. We sent out notices to the affected property owners, which are in light green here, And then we also sent out separate notices within 200 feet, so they wouldn't be confused, because sometimes they'll get a map and they'll show a buffer around it and they'll think that they're in, but they're just within 200 feet. So the purple are just within 200 feet. And as you can see, these were the ones that we left out from before. So we did receive 3 in favor of the change and none in opposition within the affected properties. So that was good news. And then of the 43 notices that were within 200 feet, we had received 2 in opposition. And I think they were concerned just going forward, having some other industrial properties being changed, even though they weren't the ones that were in it. So some of the concerns, a lot of these slides, for those of you who were here last year, haven't changed. So the property owners who objected originally were left out of the CBD boundary. So here are some of the concerns that they had, and this is still probably the same. If you rezone to CBD and you're a previous ML property, you're not going to have a limited outdoor storage. You're going to have 10% outdoor storage. Again, we don't believe that's a problem. Again, we're trying to encourage this in the downtown. So you're going to have retail uses, offices, schools, colleges, household living. All of these things are not really going to have outdoor storage anyway. Same with intermodal containers. The ML zoning would allow intermodal containers to be used as storage, but not in the CBD. And then the light manufacturing uses would also go away. So what is interesting to note is that warehousing, wholesale trade are 2 industrial type uses. I'd say more heavy commercial. They're still allowed by right in the CBD. So it's only going to be the heavy industrial uses, and then things like vehicle repair, rental equipment, and a contractor's yard. Those could still be allowed with a conditional use. So not all of the things would be taken away. So the previous research by planning staff, I had followed up on that and just looked for any new nonconformities. So I think we found a total of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 properties. I think there were 6 before, and so we got 3 more. So these are the ones that are non-conforming. All the other properties, as you can see in here, the 63 properties would be allowed. So it's just these non-conformities. The green is industrial service. The purple is vehicle repair. These would still be allowed if they got a conditional use. So they're not outzoned in that respect. So really the only one that was actually, we're wanting to rezone CBD that would not be allowed by right is this billboard sign. But again, that billboard's already there, so it's legal non-conforming. So what are some advantages of the CBD? I'll just go over this very briefly because we did look at this last year. You're going to have no parking standards. If you choose to put in parking, you'll have to pave it and stripe it, but you won't have to do parking. You won't have any front yard setback. You can go to 0 feet. If you choose to stay 25 feet back, you've got all that extra landscape open space that you can use because you don't need to put in parking. So there's a lot of advantages for business owners that are going to CBD. We talked about the front yards. So our rationale for approval is as follows. The comp plan already designates this area as downtown. So over time, this is going to change anyway. It's consistent with the zoning ordinance. The reduced standards allow redevelopment and expansion on the lots which contain the non-conforming structures. So again, as mentioned, only one of those structures is actually not going to be allowed with a conditional use. All the others that were non-conforming would be allowed with at least a conditional use. The other advantage really is the household living. It allows mixed uses, so you can have offices and retail with household living. You can just have household living, or you can just have commercial. But the biggest 2 things I would say from my research and from other staff's research is retail sales and service is going to be allowed. They're not going to be allowed in the CH or the ML or the OW by right, and then the household living component. So it just gives more flexibility for property owners in this area. The change conditions, as mentioned, 2009, it's been designated downtown, so it's just a matter of time. We don't see any adverse impacts on the natural environment. And again, the community need just allowing more flexibility for property owners. So staff recommends approval of a rezoning to the Central Business District CBD from the CG, CGCH, CHCO, ML, OW, and RM1 zoning districts. And that concludes my presentation. If anyone has any questions or comments.
Okay, I have a question.
Sure.
For those that have existing uses that do not conform to CBD zoning, will they receive a legal non-conforming designation for their current use? Or are you trying to prohibit them from continuing to use the land as they've used it?
No, if they were either legally permitted or they predated zoning, so let's assume that they all followed the rules when they constructed or pulled a permit, they would still be legal non-conforming today. They would not lose any rights that they already have. If they want to expand on the property, then they would not be able to do that without coming to at least the planning commission. That would be called an expansion of a non-conforming use.
Okay.
Or they could do a conditional use, and that would allow them to expand the footprint that way and not have to keep coming back. But they would be legal non-conforming if they just kept it as it is.
So of the land that, or the sites within this designated area that do not meet the CBD zoning designation, if it were to be rezoned, what are the conditions in which they are non-conforming with CBD?
Okay.
You mentioned outdoor storage.
Yes, so there's a couple things. So just looking at the use itself, there were, out of those 9 properties, 2 of them were vehicle repair. So let me just distinguish between a minor vehicle repair and a major vehicle repair. So if it's just oil changes, et cetera, they would be allowed. But I believe both of those businesses were auto body work, so that triggers a conditional use. So they could do it with a conditional use if they wanted to clean it up and expand, or they could just leave it alone and they'd be legal non-conforming. There was another business that was like a landscaping contractor's yard.
I'm sorry, Jeff, go back to that one again. You offered 2 options. Could you explain those options again? I don't understand what you're saying.
Okay, so there's actually 3 options. One, they just stay the way they are and they're legal non-conforming. So as long as they complied at the time they constructed, they don't lose any rights. They could stay in the same footprint as they are. So that's number 1. Number 2, they can come to the planning commission for an expansion of a non-conforming use. And that would allow them to build, let's say, an addition onto that building if the planning commission approved it, but it would only be for that one specific expansion. The third way is they do a conditional use, which is probably better. That comes to planning commission as well. And that would allow them to show, for example, a concept plan that might show multiple expansions, and they just have to do it one time. And the conditional use is valid for 12 months. So if say they wanted to add a 5,000 square foot building, you all approve that, they get a conditional use, they'd have 12 months to pull a permit and build that building. And then they would be, not only would they have legal, because if it's legal non-conforming, if something happened and the building was burned down to a crisp, they could lose that status. Even then, if it's partially destroyed, they could still come back. So I guess what I'm saying is, other than that one billboard, there would be a way to legalize what they already have if they want to expand, or they could keep it the way it is and they'd still be legal non-conforming.
What happens if the property gets sold, Jeff? Does the use follow or stay with the property?
Yes.
Okay.
But Jeff, isn't there a time frame for that? If the property is sold and it's legal non-conforming, isn't it up to 12 months for them to continue that, and then it goes back to not being allowed?
No, if it really is legal non-conforming, it's legal non-conforming for as long as it's there, even if property owners change. Okay. It's only if the only trigger for coming back for an approval is if they want to expand, then they need a conditional use.
But if they want to remodel
today is legal.
So let's say they want to remodel the building, and they're gonna substantially renovate the existing improvements. That would not trigger an issue with the legal non-conforming use, only if they expanded the footprint of the improvements. Is that correct?
Don, did you want to?
Well, I'll answer that question first. That's correct. As long as they're not expanding outward, if it's just remodeling, then yes, they continue their non-conforming status. But I wanted to go back to Ms. Jackson's question. real quick. I think you might have been asking if the business actually closes for a 12-month period, then yes, they lose that non-conforming status. So if they sell the property, the business closes, they sell the property. If it doesn't reopen as that non-conforming use within 12 months, then yes, they would lose that non-conforming status.
Thank you. Jeff, it's Friday and this morning, both, we received several more in opposition letters. So that's added on to that number that you had in your report. And it sounded like most of them are worried about their property rights being taken away or being changed without them understanding everything, that the city is intending to do with this.
Yeah, I did add it to the PowerPoint this morning, and that was one of the opposition. It was actually, the two new ones you got was for the next case for downtown overlay. So the one that was opposed, he was within 200 feet. He was one of the owners that we were going to zone CBD last time, and he's zoned ML, and he was opposed just because he was worried about his property rights. So he will not be affected by this.
Okay.
Okay. I think at this point, I'd like to open it up for public comment, and then maybe we can ask some more questions that may arise out of the feedback that we get from those that speak on this case before we make any decisions. So I'm going to open it up for public comment. If you wish to speak, if you would, please state your name and either your address or single member district when you're speaking.
Commissioner Stribling, it does appear that there is Win Palmer on the telephone. Looks like his telephone is muted. And it also appears there's a Karen Best and her microphone is muted. So Ms. Best or Mr. Palmer, if y'all would like to speak, please unmute. And then as Commissioner Stribling said, state your name and address or single member district. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Karen Best, and my office address is 202 West Beauregard, and I'm here to speak today about the downtown overlay. My understanding is y'all are focusing at the moment on that central business district overlay in the Northwest, but perhaps I'm mistaken.
Oh, and Ms. Best, Jeff Fisher in planning, that's going to be our next case after this one. If you wanted to come back, this is just for the zoning. CBD.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I know I'm in the waiting room. I just wanted to address that issue. That's all.
Okay.
Thank you, Ms. Best.
I would like to speak to, this is Win Palmer with Palmer Feed. We're currently in the exclusion zone, and my concern is some property that's going to be rezoned. It doesn't belong to me. I currently rent it, and I am in contract to purchase it. Bubba and Ronnie Harrison actually own the property. It's directly across from our feed mill. It's 1 block east of Highway 87, and it's about 1 block south of Highway 67. This piece of property lies between 3rd and 4th Streets and borders MLK. We currently use it for employee parking. We do park trucks there. It's a very, very important piece of property to our operation. We are out of room for any kind of parking or truck and trailer activity. So that piece of property is essential to our operation. And we're asking you to leave it zoned as it is currently zoned. Again, I'm in contract to buy the property. And that's really all I have to say about it. It's at the nexus of 67 and 87, so we can service our customers, you know, east, west, north, south, and that's it. Is it clear where the property is located to the planners?
Yes, I can share my screen if y'all want to see it again. It's basically east of Julio's and west of where Palmer Feed is right now. Let me see if I can do this quick.
It looks like Mr. Palmer's other land within this general area has been excluded from this rezoning. Is that correct?
Correct. So this is Palmer right now. So we've excluded this, and he wants to buy correct me if I'm wrong, Win, but it's basically 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 down here, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 here. So this is CH.
Yeah, correct.
This is CGCH. This is CO, and then Julio's is over here. So basically, you would be allowed to continue to, if this stayed out of CBD, you could park your vehicles there. That heavy vehicles and equipment would fall under industrial service. And so that the CH and the CGCH allow it. It wouldn't be allowed here, but you said these two might be for an office or something. Is that right?
That's correct. That's correct. And I'm not wanting to buy, I'm in contract to purchase. So we have a standing contract right now. We just haven't executed it. Bubba Harrison has had an unfortunate accident, and so we're waiting for him to recuperate before we, consummate the sale.
And I would just add, I think staff is comfortable. Our intent was to exclude Palmer Feed's property, and given that they use that and are requesting it to be excluded, I think we would be comfortable with that. And we can get with Mr. Palmer after the meeting to confirm the boundaries if your motion just would reference the properties, referenced by him during the meeting. But we can confirm the exact boundaries between now and going to city council, if that's your motion.
Okay. Thank you, Win.
Thank you.
Thank you, Win.
Anyone
Thank
else
you,
wish
Jeff.
to speak on this case? All right, I'm going to close public comment. And open it up for discussion amongst us or a motion. Anyone have thoughts they'd like to share?
So I just have a question. I was here a year ago, but remind me why we want to make everything CBD.
So this is in the future land use of downtown. And so we believe this is the area that, for a number of reasons, it's very close to Bryant and frontage, and also a lot of commercial development there. And so we believed it was appropriate to start moving in this direction, and it feels more like downtown. And this was going to be our next chunk that we were going to take forward.
I'm generally not opposed to rezoning this CBD, provided that the existing zoning, existing use is permitted to remain and continue. If we rezone these lots and we're stripping the rights of these landowners to utilize the land that they own for whatever the use was prior to this rezoning, it doesn't seem fair to me to strip those rights of those property owners. I understand the long-term planning and benefit of CBD zoning, but this is an area that's historically had a lot of industrial use that apparently is is not allowed under CBD zoning. And so I would be really upset if I was a landowner and I had a tract of land that was rezoned, and at some point down the road, I was told that my rights had been stripped and I could no longer utilize my land as I had purchased it. I don't know if the rest of the Planning Commission feels the same, but I'd like to see an ordinance that allows the current zoning to remain legal non-conforming, and maybe not have timeframes for stripping those rights, but rather if someone wants to change the use or down the road, go through the CBD zoning process at that point, but not to limit or prohibit what's been allowed up to this point.
And Chair Stribling, this was discussed by staff. Maybe our director, John, wants to weigh in on this as well, but I think that could be an option where, you could, like right now in the ordinance, we have certain areas where when the original zoning ordinance was passed in 2000, where it made certain uses lawful conditional uses, which is a better standard than just saying legal non-conforming.
Yeah, and I would add to that, that was sort of our intent, kind of what you're suggesting. And that's why any of those industrial property owners that have asked to be excluded, we have excluded them. And so I hear what you're saying, but I think we've, in the communications with most of them, many of them are desirous of this. In fact, as you've noticed, we've had 3 or 4 rezoning cases to CBD in this general area. And so we were just trying to get out ahead of that to help provide that flexibility to those property owners. So I think we're fine. There's a lot of this area where a lot of the property owners are in agreement that this is a good thing. So I wouldn't want to throw out everything. And the way we tried to approach that was simply excluding anyone who asked to be excluded.
I think the problem in doing that is that the burden is on the property owner to come to you guys and say that I object. And in some circumstances, if we have a property owner that's outside of San Angelo, or that for whatever reason is not contacted before this case is heard, we've stripped their rights without their input. If we just simply rezone it and say, you've got industrial use today, but we went ahead and rezoned you, so you're CBD going forward. To me, it makes sense to say, if you're industrial today, you can stay industrial as long as you want. You can also be CBD and redevelop your land down the road under the broader zoning restrictions of CBD. But if you wish to continue as industrial, or whatever the use is, if it's a body shop or a mechanic, whatever it is, you can still do that. This is a very transitional area, and I think as much as we'd like to see this area redeveloped, and I think the zoning change is going to help, I don't think it's fair to those property owners that have uses that are not permitted under CBD zoning to just have their rights stripped, because that's the long-term plan for the area.
Yeah, we can definitely look at the option, as Jeff mentioned, to go ahead and rezone those that didn't object, but with a provision that allows those industrial uses to continue, not as a non-conforming use, but basically as what we would call a conforming use. I think we'll have to do a little bit of research on whether that can be done and how we would make it happen.
Okay, so if we wish to continue on that basis, would you like for us to table this and give you guys a chance to do some research and look at it next month? Would that be the best plan going forward, or how would we address that?
Yes, that's definitely an option. That would give us the ability to make sure that what we're telling you, is absolutely correct. We would hate to move it on to city council and then realize, well, we can't actually do what you suggested. So
Okay.
There's no super rush on this. So yeah, we could table it for a month and bring that back.
Okay. I welcome the input of my colleagues here. I'm just one opinion. So
well,
does anyone else want to have thoughts on this they would like to share?
I'm in agreement with you on I think that, although the letters were sent, I guarantee that there is a lot of property owners that fully did not understand the potential, issues that may arise down the road if they did want to switch the use of their properties. I would assume that the majority of property owners in this area, since it is an older established neighborhood and district, they've most likely owned their property for a very long time. And again, I do think that we need to table this and do some further research before we actually move forward with a motion to approve it.
Okay.
I agree also. I think that there's probably some property owners that don't receive their own mail, whether they're out of town and they have an attorney looking after it, or if they're in a nursing home, whatever. And I think that needs to be, I don't know that we need to resend letters or whatever, but it needs to be brought up and figured out how to make sure that they have access to this information.
So I guess my point is that, do you guys think that if it's, let's say it's industrial zoning, and there are certain uses with industrial that are prohibited under CBD, if it's currently industrial, to me, it would make sense that we allow it to continue its current use as industrial, or if it's going to be redeveloped, that it could conform with CBD down the road. Am I making sense the way I'm describing that, or?
Yes, protecting private property rights.
Can I ask one question, Chair Stripling?
Yes, sir.
I want to make sure I'm understanding that you're saying that their existing use would be considered as if it's allowed, but changing to a different industrial use wouldn't necessarily be allowed. Is that correct? But they could expand and build new buildings and do whatever they want with their current use.
I think if it's industrial zoned, that they should be allowed to continue with industrial zoning, even if this area is rezoned. I'm going to defer to my colleagues for their input and feedback, but that's kind of that's how I would view it. What do you guys think?
I feel like we are stripping again, if the mechanic all of a sudden his business takes off and he wants to expand his business, maybe add another shop or whatever the case might be on his existing property, I don't believe that he needs to go back before city planning and jump through a bunch of hoops when he already owned the property. That really is taking away a lot of his property rights, considering when he bought the property, it was zone 1 zoning.
So I guess John's question is even broader than that. Brittany, it's the idea that the guy's a mechanic today and he wants to do something different with that property in the future that would be an industrial use that would be permitted today that wouldn't be permitted under CBD zoning. Would you want to allow that property owner to redevelop under the existing zoning, or would they be required to conform to CBD down the road?
That's tough.
It is.
Not a simple answer by any means.
Can I say one thing to y'all for the commissioners?
Yes,
so
please.
I think what you were saying, Travis, would be if it was rezoned to CBD to allow basically those existing industrial uses. I just want to clarify, because Terry asked me this earlier, what are the advantages of this? It isn't just as simple as, well, it's in the future land use, therefore we should change it to CBD. We've had a lot of requests in the past to do this and to allow more flexibility. So if there was a way to set that up where and again, I'm not saying this is our recommendation yet. I'm just saying it's
Yeah.
one of the options where they could legalize what they already have. If they do that in the context of also rezoning it to CBD, then they're going to have, if that industry goes away in a few years or 5 years from now, they won't have to come back in for another rezoning to CBD. So I think we weren't really trying to outzone what's already there, as we were trying to forward think, here are some advantages to going to CBD in the future while you're still, you still have your industrial use on the property. But again,
Right.
Well,
I'm
and
open
let
to
me
suggestions too.
add, Jeff, I think zoning at CBD, but allowing all industrial uses to continue, I'm not sure we can actually do that. So if that's your overall intent, I think we would just have to leave the industrial zoning as is. But I think there may be a way to rezone at CBD, but to allow the existing use to continue even with expansions and all of that. That
Yeah.
may be possible.
Okay.
And so in your thinking, I just wanted to make sure that was clear, that allowing all industrial uses and all CBD uses under our current zoning ordinance may not be possible.
Right. All right. Anyone else have thoughts on the planning commission they'd like to share with the staff? All right. Would anyone wish to make a motion?
I'll motion to table it to the May 17th meeting.
Okay.
Second.
All right. We have a motion and a second to table this case to our next zoning meeting, which is tentatively scheduled for May 17th. All in favor, say aye by show of hands. And opposed?
It's like 6-1 approved.
6-1. All right.
Thanks for your feedback, everyone.
All right. Next case is Z21-04 Downtown District, COSA. Request for approval to expand the boundary of the Downtown District Overlay Zone, generally located north of Neff's Way, east of Abe Street, south of 5th Street, and west of Emmerich Street.
All right, sorry about that. This is John James, Director of Planning and Development Services. This is somewhat related to the last case, but a little bit different. It's a similar area. You may recall back in 2019, we brought to you all a consideration of an expansion of the Downtown Overlay District, which is our design district. It used to all be part of the River Corridor overlay. You may remember that we split what was the River Corridor into a new River Corridor and then a downtown and a cultural district, basically to distinguish the three. The rules that apply are the same for all of them. We just got a lot of confusion from folks who said, I'm 8 blocks from the river. Why am I in the River Corridor? So this clarifies that part of the area, that we're calling the Downtown Overlay District, is really meant to regulate the downtown area. You can see the boundaries here. This outer thin line, that's what was originally recommended a couple of years ago. This inside thin line here is the current boundary of the downtown district. And so the expansion area is this thicker purple line kind of between the two. You may recall that when this came to the Planning Commission before, the commission recommended for now keeping the boundary the same. You guys did not want to look at expanding it because at the same time we were revising the ordinance and splitting the River Corridor into these 3 parts. And so at the time, that's your recommendation. It went on to City Council. They agreed, let's keep the boundaries the same as they are today. But the council also said we would be interested in looking at an expansion of the downtown district, but just not as big as the staff had originally recommended. That original recommendation was simply based on the comprehensive plan's downtown future land use designation. So it was basically from the river corridor over to Main Street and north to Houston Hart. And so you'll see what we've done here is scale that back a little bit to expand the downtown district, but not as big as we had before. Let's see if I can advance my slide here. Maybe not. Let's see. Okay. So this shows some of the boundaries. The pink is the current central business district. The red was the case you just heard. That was the area proposed for CBD expansion. And then you can see the other boundaries that I just mentioned. And then of course the green over there is the Shannon Planned Development District. So this new downtown would incorporate all of Shannon. It would pull in the Central Freshman Campus and then some of this area. And you'll see that we're going to propose changing this northern boundary slightly. And then of course on the west side, we would take it over to Konigheim instead of all the way over to the river. This is a zoom in on that north area. As we talked about with the previous case, this is Palmer Feed. They have requested to be outside of this downtown design district, as well as some properties over here that in yellow have also asked to be excluded. So staff is recommending moving our recommendation south a little bit. Originally it was the railroad track, and so now we're looking at 4th Street as the boundary. So this dashed black line would be the new proposed boundary that staff is recommending. So excluding Palmer Feed and excluding these properties. Now, in talking with Mr. Pfluger, who owns these properties to the east side, he is okay taking the line to 4th Street as long as we exclude these properties north of 4th. And so again, our new proposed boundary would end on the north side at 4th Street and then down to 3rd to exclude that Palmer Feed property. This is just a map in case there are questions showing the existing zoning of the area. Again, this doesn't change the underlying zoning, but it does pull these properties into an area where new construction, exterior construction, would need a review either by the staff in some cases, or in some cases by the Design and Historic Review Commission. This is just a map showing some of those properties already are subject to design control, and I'll come back to that in a minute when I talk about one of the opponents on this case. The current downtown overlay was approved in 2019, as I mentioned, with the same boundaries as the portion of the downtown that was in the river corridor. And I already talked about the proposal to expansion. This is coming back with a smaller request. So here's our notification. As Jeff mentioned with the previous case, we sent out separate notices to those folks affected versus those folks just within the surrounding notification area. And so I'll note here, we had 10 responses in favor, 10 in opposition. And then within the 200 feet, again, those are properties not affected. There were 2 more in opposition. But I want to talk briefly about the opposition. 7 of the opposition were properties that are already within the downtown overlay district. So there's really no impact to their properties. They're already within the district. And so it's not adding them since they're already in. I've mentioned 2 other properties on the north side here that we're proposing to exclude. So I think you can discount that opposition because we're recommending removing them. And so there's 1 more opposition over here, the Episcopal Church, and I think they have folks here to speak. I just want to point out that they are already subject to historic overlay zoning, which is much more restrictive than the downtown district. And in fact, the way our process works, that will not add any additional, it won't add any additional requirements, and it won't add any additional applications or fees when they want to do something on their property. Again, since the historic overlay zoning is more restrictive already, adding this does not really affect their property at all. If they come in, they don't have to file 2 applications, 1 for historic, 1 for the downtown overlay. If you're in both districts, you still just have to apply once. So again, I know they're here to speak, but I just wanted to make sure that was clear, that because they have the historic zoning, this does not place any additional restrictions on them. I'm not going to read through all of these. They're in your staff report, but basically staff's rationale for recommending this. It includes some of the properties that we've recommended for CBD expansion. It is an area where we're seeing more growth and redevelopment, and we want to make sure that we maintain that the downtown is the historic core of the city and that there's a minimum level of quality of design. I just want to point out some of the questions we've gotten are related to what are the design standards. And when the DHRC or staff looks at development in these areas, something in this northern, what you might call industrial part of downtown would not have to meet the same standards as say a building built in the 1800s on Concho Avenue. It's our regulations are really context based. So it's based on the historic patterns of development around you and just basic aesthetic principles of what is good design. And so those properties in the north aren't going to be held to the same standard as the truly historic properties on the southern part of downtown. As we've talked about, I think one of the issues here is, especially in this area where you're going to have a mix of industrial and commercial and residential all in the same area, then I think we want to have some particular attention paid to how those uses fit in, and having some minimal design review, I think, would be helpful. It is consistent with the city's comprehensive plan and the recommendation that this is the area within which the city's downtown should grow into the future. And of course, staff does recommend approval of this reduced, smaller downtown zone. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Does anyone
John,
have questions for the staff?
I was going to ask John to go back to the historical part that he had. It was real quick when we went through that.
Yeah.
Okay, so these are just the ones that have the design control that are marked.
Yeah, well, everything within the current downtown district, so this thin inside purple line, everything within that is subject to the design standards. And then the properties with the red dots are also historic, and so they have to meet the historic guidelines as well.
Okay. And so since the river corridor has split, does each individual the CBD, the downtown overlay, and the river corridor, do they each have their own set of basically rules or outlines of what they're supposed to do, what designates them that?
Yeah, currently the regulations are the same throughout all areas. I think one of the reasons we split them was that in the future we could create some different standards for downtown versus the river versus the cultural district. But right now the regulations are the same. But as I mentioned earlier, those regulations are pretty broad, and they're really about compatibility with the surrounding area and just a minimum level of aesthetic standard. So the DHRC and staff, when we review, really look at the context of the area. So something right on the river is going to be looked at differently from something in the historic core of downtown, and that's going to be looked at differently than something, say on Konigheim or up in this industrial area. So it gives the flexibility to the commission to look at the context of the surrounding area.
So wouldn't it be better to have that decided before you vote on expanding it and dividing it, to know exactly what what you're wanting to accomplish and what the guidelines are?
Well, I guess I would say that we do have guidelines in place that work well across all three boundaries. So I don't think, I didn't mean to suggest that we think there's something that needs to be fixed in those regulations. It's just that down the road, this would allow us to tweak it in the downtown, but not the cultural district or river corridor if we wanted to. But I think the current regulations still work well across all the boundaries, because they do have that flexibility built in, that it's not a one size fits all regulation.
So the tweaking would be done within the committee, or how?
Yeah, any changes to those regulations would have to go through the Design and Historic Review Commission, and then Planning Commission, and then City Council would ultimately adopt them if there were going to be changes in those underlying rules.
Okay, thank you. And can you go to the, I think it's the next slide that shows some people opposing, that are already in the downtown or the downtown overlay district right now that are in opposition.
Yeah,
So,
I think that might have been some confusion with the notices that were sent out. The folks already in the district were sent out a notice. And so, again, nothing is changing for their property. And some of the comments were things like, well, we don't need another overlay. And so there might have been some confusion that they were thinking, well, they're already in one overlay, this is going to be a different overlay applied to them, but that's really not the case. They're already in the boundary today.
okay, I was just wondering if there was something going on that they are opposed to currently, and we're against that portion of it.
I think speaking from personal experience, the broad regulation, or the broad aesthetic review aspect of this downtown overlay, I think is troublesome personally. I think if we had clearer development standards and requirements within this district, it goes back to kind of one of my general themes. Developers want predictability within the areas that they're making investments. And so if you're buying a building downtown and you have to have a design committee review and approve what you're planning to do to the exterior of the building, and there's broad regulation within that review, such that it allows the committee to have personal input on their aesthetic like or dislike of what you're doing, it's troublesome, because as a developer, you don't have an understanding of what's required of that site in order to develop it. So if you don't understand what the rules are, and you're looking at making an investment, and you have to go through committees for approval or deal with the city for the approval of some aspect of that project, it discourages investment within that area, because developers want predictability. So, for example, the colors that you might select for the exterior of your building, you want to paint your brick a brown color, and you have to submit the brown color sample to the committee for approval. Well, maybe 4 people like it and 5 people don't. And now you've got to go through the process of selecting a different brown color for the exterior of your building, where if we had tighter standards that said browns within this range, or no bright colors, or something that defined what's allowed and what's not allowed, you're still having to go through the design review for approval, but it's not at the whim and personal preference of the committee that's reviewing the case. It's looking at what's allowed in the rules and what's being proposed, and does that meet the standard or not. That's my personal input and feedback. I haven't talked to the other property owners that are in opposition. I'm hoping that we hear from some of them as we go through this, but that's my 2 cents on on this process.
Well, and let me address that real briefly. I know your comment was more general, and I hear what you're saying.
Yeah.
As far as paint colors, though, we actually have taken your concern to heart, and in most circumstances, if you're using a color on a historic color palette, which there are literally hundreds, then that can be approved administratively. It doesn't have to go to the DHRC, and so we've tried to address that concern by not taking that personal preference into it. The other thing I would say, having done this in a few cities, it's really a spectrum, because I've been in cities where you really define it and it's predictable for a developer, but then you lose the flexibility when somebody comes in with something unique and they don't meet the standards. And so the tendency is to want to give it some more broad language and flexibility, but then you're losing that predictability. So it is kind of a sliding scale, whether you want more predictability or more flexibility for staff and the commission to decide. And I think historically, the city of San Angelo has erred on the side of more flexibility to be able to accommodate developers. And I think our DHRC has, in most cases, done a good job of, I know there's a concern that in some cases, they might seem to get nitpicky, but at the end of the day, they generally allow, with some back and forth, they allow a development to move forward. I don't know of many that have been stopped in their tracks just because the commission was so adamant about a particular, material or color.
Okay.
But I hear your concerns.
All right. Thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to ask questions or share comments with the staff before we open this up for public comment? Okay, I'm going to open it up for public comment. If you wish to speak on this case, please state your name and your address or single member district.
Hi, my name's Karen Best. I guess I'll go first. With regard to comment, if there's anybody else who'd like to speak before me, I'll yield the floor.
Fire away, Karen.
All right, thank you. And thank you for the opportunity to visit with you this morning about this issue. I'm just going to start out. I'm an attorney in private practice. My office is at 202 West Beauregard. We are what used to be, I assume, never saw it myself, the old Western Auto building. We've been converted into a suite of condos that house attorneys and other businesses downtown. We are across the street from the courthouse. I don't know if you're familiar with our particular building, but it is next door to Emmanuel Episcopal Church, across the street from the courthouse, and I guess catty corner from Bill's Man Shop. Does that help with regard to?
Yes, it does.
Okay.
Thank you.
So with regard to this office, if you know anything about all of the offices that are in this, essentially a condo association, we are primarily attorneys, an insurance company, a property owner managing his properties around town, and I believe an interior designer. And if you've ever tried to get that many people together to just agree on a paint color just within our own building, it's quite a feat. So I'm not necessarily objecting to somebody coming in and saying, hey, we can help with that, because we just recently repainted this building and put new awnings on it. And just getting those individuals together to make a decision took a little over a year. So a part of the concern that I have with regard to this overlay, there are a couple. And so bear with me. The first is notification. So as an attorney, I pride myself on trying to be prepared for a meeting, and try as I might, I did not have an opportunity, even though I spent a significant amount of time trying. I couldn't find enough information on what this meant, even going through the ordinances and the overlays, seeing what the issue would be with regard to any kind of changes to my property rights as a property owner. I received this one sheet of paper from the city with kind of a furry overlay, and I couldn't even clearly identify my property on it. Timeline wise, let's see. It says it was mailed on March the 29th. My office closes at noon on Fridays. And so I received my mail now sometime late afternoon. So it came in either Friday the 9th or Saturday, April the 9th or Saturday, April the 10th. It could have been either one. I had it on my desk on the following Monday. I had my first opportunity to read it in between all the other things I had. And I made my first call to the city because on the reverse side of this map, it said to contact Jeff Fisher. I made my first call and left a message on April the 14th. I know everyone is busy. I didn't receive a call back. I didn't receive a call back on April the 15th, and I made a second call on April the 16th. So in speaking to Mr. Fisher, super nice. He said, what we're trying to do here is to keep metal buildings from being built in areas in the CDB overlay. And all of that was kind of Greek to me. So I spent a significant part of my weekend trying to figure out what that meant. In the meantime, he also identified for me the fact that he didn't identify me as a property owner because I'm not on the tax rolls as a property owner for this property. This is right. If you do a search of this property, for whatever, however they do it over at the appraisal district, you will not see my name on this property because I co-own it with my husband, who is an elected official, and for security reasons, our names are removed, as are several other property owners who will be affected by this because of their elected positions. And so, preparing for this, I went up this weekend to try and figure out what the restrictions would be on my legal restrictions would be on my property. I couldn't find a standard. I wasn't sure what it meant. I looked at the city's website. I was up 10 o'clock last night, still on the website, texting people that I knew, trying to figure out information about this. And quite frankly, it wasn't there. So when I pulled up this morning, getting ready for this, here were notes and maps and a report and all of these things. And effectively, I just printed off the report. It's this thick, trying to go through and figure out what I've got. I have no clue what's going on with my property today, but I'm here to say, hey, my understanding is when we were working on planning and overlays, I did even go to some website, National Organization of Civic Planning and all of this good stuff. And it said something as simple as, I'm trying to learn about placemaking and all the things y'all all know about very well. And it says it's best done when it involves the citizens of the community in generating ideas for the use of the public space. Well, I can promise you that the people involved, at least in our building, as I went up and down the sidewalk asking what their thoughts were, they didn't know about it. And two of them were opposed. And went, you go fight them, girl. And I'm like, I don't even know if I want to fight them. I don't even know what it's about. So my 2 cents here today is say, could we just please get those slides that were the city just presented? They were wonderful. You could read them. I think we need some information, and I would just ask the commission to consider tabling this until we have some knowledge about what this means, not just to our property today, but to our property in the future. If we want to make an improvement, we just made improvements to this property. And as Mr. Urick can testify, because he's my lender, he knows what a pain in the rump it was to try and get everything done on this building, just because people are busy and the like. But I think we just need a little more time to figure out what's going on. I can't say whether I'm for it or against it. I don't know what it's doing to my property, but I do know that when we talk about use of the property here, just specific to the people who are in my specific area, we are sometimes the downtown stepchild over here. I don't know if we're the back storage closet for all the problems or what. The downtown development, when I think downtown and the corridors and the overlays, they make sense to me around the historic buildings that are downtown. It makes sense along the river corridor. I understand what was being discussed with regard to the CBD overlay just north of here. But we are kind of in this linchpin area where, as far as our use is concerned, we absolutely need to be having a dialogue, because I can't let my staff, 4 women who are here, work here after 6 o'clock because homeless isn't even the right term anymore. I know it's the unhoused, but we have some real issues having to do with properties around here that paint color isn't going to fix. we're going to have to talk about use. We're going to have to talk, if we're rezoning these areas, about what people can and can't do with their properties. There are a number of issues that are going on at the city and discussions that are being had that aren't involving people who are affected down here. I don't know who's here from Emmanuel Episcopal Church. I know they're next door. I'm a member of that church. Haven't been during COVID, but next door, the beautiful church, historic church, can't even keep the ground cover on the playground because it's being used as a human bathroom. And so they had to take up the mulch in the playground for that reason. I myself have gone out of here after dark and had to call SAPD to come help me because I'm approached by someone who is inebriated and coming from downtown and decided he wanted to strike up a conversation with me after dark, and it got a little scary. So we have some real issues with safety downtown. We have some real issues with, having to take up our own design element out on the sidewalks, including nice stone benches, because people were sleeping on them, leaving syringes, even defecating and vomiting on our sidewalks. And we're a law office right across the street from a courthouse. So I understand the objectives. I think it may be a little bit of overreach. And I especially think we just don't know what it does. We don't know what it does for us, and we haven't been involved in the conversation. So I respectfully just ask maybe for an opportunity for the property owners here to get some real information and some real notice so that we can have the conversations we need to have to move forward. And I thank you for letting me make these comments.
Ms. Best, thank you very much. We appreciate you taking the time to do this.
Thank you.
Does anyone else wish to speak on this case?
This is Lee Pfluger. I'm in, I don't know what, District 1, I guess. Boy, following that, I don't have a lot to say. All I would say is that Travis Stribling is point on in terms of what my objections were with multiple overlays, not knowing what the overlays were going to do to us, not just what it's going to do to us today, but how the reach is going to be once you get this overlay, and then it reaches and all of a sudden it's, we're adding this particular aspect and restrictions to this overlay, which would not require a lot of discussion. It would just be a simple staff decision to add that to the overlay. I'm comfortable with some of my properties being, they're on the north end, they're industrial, and they need to stay industrial. They're right on the rail, and any future use of that could be with a company that has a color palette that is going to be indigenous to their operation, and it may or may not go through the requirements of whatever the staff would want to do in terms of color palette. So I appreciate staff looking and considering that whenever I think have made their second recommendation to bring the zone or the rezoning or the overlay down to stop it at 4th Street and leaving the industrial part north of 4th Street between 4th and the railroad as industrial. And I appreciate y'all's consideration.
Thank you, Mr. Pfluger.
Well, I concur with Lee. Everything he said was spot on. And I think if I understood Mr. James correctly, his intent was to leave the industrial concerns industrial and not part of the overlay. Any kind of design requirements may not meet our form factor, and I just have concerns about that. We're in a constant state of flux with respect to construction, so I don't need more oversight. I probably could deal with a little bit of less oversight. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Palmer.
This is Jeff Fisher in the planning department. I just wanted to know if Mr. Jess Stanford or the Reverend Matthew Rowe was on this call. They had also requested to speak today.
They are not in the waiting room.
Okay, thanks, Ray.
Okay, is there anyone else wishing to speak on this case?
Hey, John, the bank is actually located in the expansion area. I'm not sure if I shouldn't recuse myself. I mean, I'll kind of defer to your thought there. I'll do whatever.
Yeah, I might defer to Brandon, but I think typically since that property is affected, you don't own it individually, but as an employee, yeah, Brandon, I think you probably should, right?
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Okay.
Okay. So Mr. Urick has recused himself. I'm going to close public comment. I think the comments from Ms. Best are most relevant in my overall opinion, and that is that when we're looking at making significant changes that impact so many property owners, we've got to do a better job of getting notice out to those that are impacted, and giving someone less than a week to review, understand, and provide input or feedback on what's being done that may impact their property is, in my opinion, not enough time. So I would personally like to see this tabled to the next meeting so that this area that's impacted directly, all of the owners in this area have at least another 30 days of opportunity to understand what the impact is and provide their input or feedback as we consider making a change to this overlay.
Chair Stribling?
Yes.
Hi, this is Jeff in the planning department. I
Yes,
worked
sir.
on notifications, and so last time when we did our CBD zoning, I don't know about the downtown district the first time, but our standard is usually 2 weeks. We did give 3 weeks. But I attest to Karen's point that sometimes depending on the mail and when it actually gets received, it may be less than the 3 weeks, but we did give the 3 weeks notice. What, if we're going forward and we end up tabling this, what would be reasonable for staff? And please let me know if you want us to mail out the letters even earlier, or if there's any other procedures that would be better.
And before you answer that, I guess I would have a similar question. I'm not sure how we would deal with folks like Miss Bess, whose property records are hidden for security reasons. I'm not sure how we reach those people. I guess in short, I hear your comment, and I think giving them more notice, we can definitely do that. I would also recommend, if you want to table it, if you maybe don't table it to the next meeting, because it might take us a little while to work through some of this with some of these property owners, maybe even trying to hold a town hall meeting or something.
Yes.
So just table it, and then we can bring it back when we've done, some of the things that you've suggested, rather than.
I think that makes a lot of sense, John. And this, I know that we've had these conversations about notification on other cases. I know that the city's conforms with the state requirements for notification, but in some cases, this being one, but developments that impact an area that's outside of the required notification area. For example, the rezoning of land for a multifamily site that's in part or on the boundary of a neighborhood. The notification area for that, I don't think the 200 feet is adequate. I think the entire neighborhood's impacted by that and should be notified. And I don't know how to change it within the city, but I would love to see a better effort from the city to get notice out to these folks. I don't know if the newspaper or TV, or it seems like just mailing these out doesn't address or provide proper notice to everyone that's impacted in some of these cases. Especially if they're receiving the mail inside a week or even 2 weeks of the hearing that's taking place that may decide the matter. That's feedback that I've received from other folks kind of over the course of time that I've served on the Planning Commission. So I'm happy to table it until June or July if you see fit. Does anyone else on the commission have an opinion?
This is such a large area that's going to essentially be impacted that I think a town hall meeting would be the best route to go. That way everyone's getting the same information at the same time. We can hit on some people that may have their addresses disclosed for personal reasons. But I mean, it is a very large area that's going to be potentially impacted, and all of those property owners, whether they're tenants or owners, have a right to actually understand what's about to happen. So I'm completely for tabling it for a few months, but I would recommend going forward with some sort of town hall meeting.
And I think a town hall meeting makes sense for this. It would also probably give the local media an opportunity to join and provide some sort of recap for folks that weren't able to attend the town hall meeting. They can maybe read an article in the newspaper or watch a blurb on the evening news or something. I don't know what we need to do from a notification standpoint, but I feel like we've got to do a better job of getting the word out to everyone that's impacted. And I'm not saying that the area overall that's impacted by this is it looks like probably 10 or 12 square blocks, which is significant, but it's not nearly as significant as the impacts that we've seen in other cases in other areas of town. And so those are my thoughts. Does anyone wish to make a motion or share their thoughts before we go forward?
Would expanding it to 90 days out, would that give you enough time to have a town hall meeting and get the answers or questions that you need answered for the?
Well, I think so, but since we're going to have to do sort of starting the process over, there's no need to table it to a specific date unless you want to. I would recommend simply tabling it, and then once we've done the things we need to do, we could bring it back. It could be next month, it might be 3 months, but that gives us the flexibility to bring it back basically when we're ready instead of having to hit a hard deadline.
Okay. I thought you had to have a date to bring it back.
Well, that's only to avoid sending out new notices. But in this case, we're going to be sending out some new notices anyway. So it's not going to apply here.
Okay. I'd make a motion to table this.
I'll second that motion.
All right, we have a motion and a second to table Z21-04. All in favor, say aye by show of hands. And opposed?
It's like 5-1 for tabling.
All right. Conditional uses, the Planning Commission has final authority for approval. Appeals may be directed to City Council. CU 21-04, 2310 West Tuig Avenue, a request for approval of conditional use for a short-term rental of a single-family residential zoning district located at 2310 West Tuig Avenue.
Good morning again. This is Shelley Pascal. Hopefully y'all can see my slides. This property is located at 2310 West Tuig Avenue, and the future land use is neighborhood. The zoning is single family residential. It's within District 5, Lane Carter, and the neighborhood Santa Rita. The future land use, as I stated in the zoning, the future land use is neighborhood, and it's within RS1 single family residential. This is a photograph of the subject property. As you can see, it's just a single family home located within a neighborhood. And this is looking both east and west along Tuig. The rationale for approval, we do not believe that there will be any adverse impacts on the surrounding properties for this proposed short-term rental, and the location is compatible with the surrounding area. This short-term rental will be located with an existing detached single-family dwelling that complies with all the setbacks, and it does have 2 paved required parking spaces in front of the home. Like I stated, it is compatible with the surrounding area, and it will blend in. We do not anticipate any adverse impact on the natural environment. There is a need as a community as a whole for more living availabilities, and especially given this location, its closeness to ASU. And it should not have any adverse effects on the development patterns. I did send out 24 notifications, and I did receive 3 in favor and 0 in opposition. City staff, we are recommending approval of the conditional use to allow a short-term rental in the single-family residential district, subject to the following 7 conditions of approval, which are standard to most short-term rentals. That being, they have to have the 2 off-street parking spaces. They must register with the state of Texas and COSA for the purpose of hotel tax. There shall not be any exterior evidence of a short-term rental. And they shall obtain a certificate of occupancy for the short-term rental. They must comply and obtain the annual fire inspection safety from the city fire marshal's office. And also they should maintain the short-term rental operations in manner consistent with section 406 of the zoning ordinance. And there shall not be any outdoor storage on the premises, commercial in aspect or in feel. Is there any questions? I know I kind of ran through that quickly, but it's kind of one of those standards, and city staff were supporting it. We feel like it does fit in this neighborhood.
All right. Anyone have questions for the staff? All right, I'm going to open it up for public comment.
Mr. Cano, if you want to go ahead and say your name and your address, and go ahead and say anything you'd like.
Okay, sir. Yeah, the first name is Alazar. Last name is Cano, C-A-N-O. And the address is the 2310 west of Tuig Avenue here in San Angelo. And basically, it's a 2-bedroom, 1-bath, built back in the 60s, but it's been recently redone. It's a nice little, again, about a 1,300 square foot home. And primarily it'll be, used again for short-term rental. I've met the neighbors. I've, kind of done a little bit of my due diligence just in being here for the past couple of months, trying to get everybody to understand what the purpose of the property will be. Because it is an investment, I'm going to make sure and keep it up, and I'm going to check in on a regular basis. I've got folks that are going to come in and clean it and, take care of my lawn and whatnot. So if anything, I think it'll be a nice little spot along the street that folks will have a hard time telling that it's anything but a residential home. There'll be different vehicles obviously coming and going, but other than that, it's going to be, it should maintain the integrity of the neighborhood and a lot of pleasant folks around here. So I want to make sure my neighbors are happy. That's it. Appreciate y'all.
Thank you, Mr. Cano.
Yes, sir.
Anyone else wish to speak on this case? If so, please state your name. All right, I'm going to close public comment. Anyone on the commission wish to share thoughts or make a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve as presented.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second to approve as presented. All in favor, say aye by show of hands. And opposed?
Approved 7-0. Oh, wait, are you, Commissioner Spano, are you opposed? I apologize. Commissioner Spano, are you for?
No, I think I have a little,
Okay.
So he's in favor.
Approved 7-0.
7-0.
Yes.
All right. CU 21-05, 212 North Magdalen Street. Request for approval of a renewal of a conditional use for a short-term rental, the low-rise multifamily zoning district located at 212 North Magdalen Street.
Thank you, Chairman. Shelley Pascal again. This was previously approved May 2020. This is its 1-year renewal process. After this, if it is approved, it gets to wait the 2 years to come back for a renewal. It's for a short-term rental located at 212 North Magdalen. The future land use is neighborhood. The zoning is RM1, which is low-rise multifamily. District 3, Harry Thomas in the downtown neighborhood. This is the subject property. And this is looking both north and south of the subject property and across Magdalen from the subject property is one of Shannon's parking lots. There does not appear to be any adverse impacts on the surrounding properties, and it will be compatible with the surrounding area. It will be located in a single-family detached dwelling that meets all the setbacks and has the required 2 parking spaces. As I stated, it will be compatible with the surrounding area and will blend in with the residential neighborhood. Staff does not anticipate any adverse impacts on the natural environment. There is a need in the community for short-term rentals, especially at this location, given its closeness to Shannon Medical Center. And there should be no adverse impacts on the development patterns. I did send out 8 notifications. I received 1 in favor and 0 in opposition. City staff will recommend approval of CU 2105 or renewal of a conditional use to allow short-term rental in a low-rise multifamily RM1 zoning district, subject to the standard 7 conditions of approval. Maintain the parking space, the 2 off-street parking spaces. They shall register with the state of Texas and the city of San Angelo for the hotel tax. There shall be no exterior evidence of the short-term rental. They must obtain a certificate of occupancy, also comply and obtain the annual fire inspection, and maintain the short-term rental occupations consistent with section 406 of the zoning ordinance. And there shall not be any outdoor storage on the premises. Any questions for me on this short-term rental?
Any questions for the staff? All right, I'm going to open it up for public comment. If you wish to speak on this case, please state your name. All right, I'm going to close public comment. Anyone wish to make a motion?
I make a motion to approve as presented.
Second.
Brittany,
we
you
have a
turned
motion.
off. There you are. Thank you.
We have a
I have
motion
a
and a
question.
second.
Did we
Yes.
check police and reports and all that kind of stuff?
Yes, sir. There, on this one, there has not. One second, I'll put that in the staff report. And I don't want to confuse it with my other short-term rental. Just 1 second. I did check with police and fire, and there was a police violation on the property that an alarm went off, but it appeared to be a false alarm. That was back in April of 2020. And there was a theft report in January 2021 from stolen property. So there was 2 police reports, but 0 code enforcement violations on the property.
Okay.
All right. We have a motion and a second to approve as presented. All in favor, say aye with show of hands. And opposed?
Approved 7-0.
All right, CU 21-06, 1001 East 28th Street. Request for approval of conditional use for telecommunications facility within the general commercial, heavy commercial zoning district located at 1001 East 28th Street.
Excuse me for just a moment. Let me bring my PowerPoint back up. There we go. Okay. What you have before you is, I think, a really good way to end the day. This is a positive request for a conditional use for a replacement broadcasting tower at KLST Nexstar, which is generally located on the corner of Armstrong and 28th Street. There presently are 2 towers at that site, and they are taking down both of those towers, and they are putting up a lower tower, a 190-foot tower in its place. It is in District 4, Ms. Gonzalez's district, and it is the Paul Ann neighborhood. The future land use on the property is commercial, but the zoning is a split zoning. And in this case, that does not matter because the same property owner owns both the general commercial and heavy commercial and owns the RS1 zone property. And for the replacement on a tower, that does not have an effect. This is a picture of the existing 2 towers that will be replaced. These towers are guy wires towers. They're being replaced by a 190-foot monopole tower. There will be no guide wires. And so there was no need to measure any distance close to the property line on that. We sent out 10 notices. There is 0 returned in favor and 0 opposed. In this case, when staff was looking at the rationale, replacing 2 larger towers with 1 shorter tower made sense. We do not anticipate any impacts on the surrounding property owners. The conditional use is consistent with the zoning requirements for that area. And this is generally a commercial area, and the new tower will be an advantage to the area. We don't anticipate any natural effects or any effects on the natural environment. And staff believes that there is a demonstrated community need for the broadcasting towers in the area. And by replacing this will enhance both the service to the community and provide for better community information and entertainment. And this is consistent with the existing development patterns, and we don't anticipate any change because of that. Staff is recommending approval of the conditional use for the replacement broadcasting tower at 1001 East 28th Street with 5 conditions of approval. The first condition, there shall be only the 1 broadcasting communications tower of the 190 feet that they've proposed. Second is that the tower facility will comply with all of the applicable standards set forth in section 426. Section 3 says the petitioner shall indicate the final latitude and longitude coordinates for the GIS tracking purposes. Condition 4 is that the original application, which was for a guy wire supported tower, this is a replacement monopole tower. We will receive revised plans, and we understand at this point that those plans are in the works, but we have not received them as staff. And so we're asking to have those on file. And they would have to do that anyway when they submitted for their building permit. And condition 5, approval of the new tower is contingent upon the demolition and removal of the existing 2 towers on the site. And they have already submitted for their demolition permit. And with that, I can stop sharing and answer any questions that you might have.
All right, anyone have questions for the staff? All right, I'm going to open it up for public comment. Anyone wish to speak on this case, please state your name. All right, I'm going to close public comment. Anyone wish to make a motion?
Move to accept as presented.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second to approve as presented. All in favor, say aye with show of hands. And opposed?
Looks like it's approved 7-0.
All right. Director's report.
I really only have one thing to add. My report will be a little bit different this month than the past few months. It looks like we're moving towards meetings in person again. I think we've contacted all of you. If we haven't, let us know. But I think the consensus was that in-person meetings were good to go forward with from your standpoint. We're still having some internal discussions. Right now, I think all or most boards and commissions are still meeting virtually, but City Council has already gone back to in-person meetings. So we're looking at possibly your next meeting or maybe the one after that going back to in-person. We'll definitely let you know well in advance of that happening. But I just wanted to give you that heads up that it looks like we're moving in that direction.
All right. Thank you, John. Future meeting agenda and announcements. The next regular meeting of the Planning Commission is tentatively scheduled to begin at 9 a.m. on Monday, May 17th, 2021. Adjournment. Anyone wish to make a motion?
Make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to adjourn. All in favor, say aye with show of hands. Opposed?
No one is opposed to that motion.
All right, it is 11:22.